Hello and welcome to Zero Cool Gaming. Today I will be doing a review of a anime called 12 Kingdoms. 12 Kingdoms came out in 2003 through 2005. There are 45 episodes to it, so it is a rather long anime. It is listed as a fantasy anime, but in my opinion, I would call this a action drama. It is set in a fantasy setting. The reason I call this a fantasy drama is because the emphasis is on the story. It is more about what happens to these people and how they react to it than it is about the occurrences themselves. To give a base of what this story is actually about, this story is about growing up. Going from a teenager or a young adult and becoming an adult. At its core, that's what this story is. And it is very well written for that. There were times that this show, this story, brought me to emotional states. That is a very high bar for me. It is not easy for a form of media to make me emotional in any way, shape, or form. That's why I give 12 Kingdoms a big thumbs up as one of the best anime I've ever watched. It's extremely enjoyable if you like good stories. So what's it about? Well, basically, two girls and a guy from Earth get transported to another world. In the beginning, they really have no idea why they're there or what they're there to do, but they all have their own opinions on it. The main story revolves around a young woman with red hair and her ascension to the throne of one of these kingdoms. Story starts out with quite a bit of action, um, and then it calms down, and then it goes up again, and then it calms down, and then it goes up again, and then it calms down. Uh, and it does this repeatedly. And for good reason, because every time the storyline changes from one person to the next, what it's really doing is you're starting the story of the next person and their trials that they go through from being a young adult and going into adulthood. Within the story, some of the trials are pretty extreme. What do I mean by that? Well, there's one of the girls who, one of the trials is that she is to be tied and quartered. Pretty extreme. But what made it interesting was that the person she disliked the most and the person that she felt hated her the most was the same person and the only person that went out of their way to save her life. I think it was to basically show her not just her emotional state, but her state of mind was still that of a child. She couldn't see the goodness within this person because of her own bias and hatred. So that was something that she had to learn the hard way. And it almost killed her, literally. And there's trials like that for all of the well, not main characters, because there's only one main character, but for all the characters that are involved in this story. And this story is about how the interactions between people can change the direction of one's life. Just like in real life, there's sometimes you meet people who just merely because of your interaction with them, because of your involvement with them in your life, it ends up changing the direction of your life. I find those type of stories to be very interesting because it's happened a couple of times in my own life. Very relatable. So, like I said, 12 Kingdoms is a rather long story. There are several characters that end up coming together about three-quarters of the way through the story. And you get your kind of happily ever after ending moment in time. And then shortly thereafter, the realization that life goes on and life is never happily ever after, but it can be mostly happy. It just depends on your outlook on life around you and how you deal with the trials that life throws at you. Uh, Most of life has to do with your perspective on it, not necessarily what's happening in life itself. And this story does a great job of showing that and explaining it. I mean, one of her friends that's brought to this world can't deal with the world that he's in. It's too much for his mind to take. And he has a complete mental breakdown and becomes a recluse as a result because he can't handle it. It's too much for him. And that is the thing that men do. If they have a mental break, they have a tendency to close themselves off from the world completely and just not deal with any of it. While other men find it a challenge and, stand up and try to take the problem head on and deal with it. Um, so, yeah, it's a very well written story. I enjoyed it very much. So let's kind of go through the story itself, and I'll kind of break down how this story goes. So you end up in this new world, a local town, end up capturing you and your friends. The laws in the country or kingdom that you're captured within is that people like you are to be killed. So you're tied up and sent off to be killed. On the way there, there are demons in this world. They attack, which gives you the opportunity to flee. And during that time, the main character gets separated from the other two. A few things happen. She passes out thinking that, she's going to die. Somebody finds her. And when she wakes up, she's in a cabin with food and water. And an animal person walks in talking to her, and she finds this rather disturbing and you could even say she's fearful to begin with. As she starts to learn about this world from this person, she realizes that maybe it's not completely horrible. So, him and her make a plan to travel to another kingdom where her death is not law. And they don't put people like her to death just because they are like her. After that, we start another story about another character. Um, this character is a Kirin. They are the other half to the king or queen of the kingdoms within 12 kingdoms. You could say that it's a kind of like a dual rulership that is supposed to be in place over each of these kingdoms, where you have one ruler that is, you know, let's say benevolent and good, and another ruler who is flawed as any other human and can do good or evil, can create great things or destroy everything. Um, And the story goes through the life of this Kieran, and then, the troubles that he went through growing up and becoming a man and then realizing what he is and those sorts of things. Then we start another story about a young woman who was once a princess and became a farmer through circumstances that truly she had no control over. Maybe she could have, helped, maybe she couldn't, but she never tried. And that's really the lesson that she was supposed to learn, is that if she wants to succeed in life, she has to at least put forth effort, give a real give it a real try, and, like the rest of us, hope for the best. That's a hard lesson learned for some people. After that, we start learning about another person, another girl. This girl was actually from Earth. She was transported to this world, much like the Queen. And she wants to meet the Queen of K because they're both from the same world, and she thinks that they'll have a lot in common with each other. Maybe. Well, her journey is basically the journey of, again, a person who thought they could grow up by learning nothing. And that's not how you grow up. She came to this new world and ended up becoming a slave for 100 years because she thought that just by being a servant for that amount of time, that she would not only earn her freedom at the end of it, but be capable of handling her life. Hard lessons learned. That's not how life really works. You actually have to try to learn and better yourself if you want to be able to survive on your own. And this is a lesson that she had to learn the hard way through 100 years of servitude. Then the story moves on, and you learn about another Kieran and the trials that he had. This Kieran was actually born on Earth, so he had no idea what he was. He just thought he was a young kid. And he was brought back to the 12 Kingdoms universe and is slowly taught and learns that he is not just a normal human. His trials, in truth, are the trials of ignorance. He doesn't, because he's so young, he doesn't have enough life experience to know how to handle himself as an adult. And that's where the arc of this story actually goes. He ends up going back to Earth to grow up before he returns to the world of 12 Kingdoms. And the very end of the show is essentially about a king of another kingdom within the 12 Kingdoms universe who also came from Earth. And when he was taking the throne and trying to better his country, he ended up having to kill one of his. You could even say he was the best politician, ruler. I don't really know how to explain who this other man was. He was like the leader of men in a particular area of this kingdom. So, like a governor. Let's say he was a governor of a state. And he was a very good governor. He knew how to take care of his people, and his people were generally happy, and he took good care of the land. The problem is that he had no right to be doing it. He had taken this from his father. And he wasn't done there. He thought he could just take the kingship from the king and just rule over the entire land, the whole kingdom. And truly, that's not how things work in this world. So, yeah, the king had to kill him in order to save his kingdom from destruction. Hard lesson. It's not something he wanted to do, and he tried everything he could to prevent it. Good story. Great story. I loved it. I wish there were more like it. Um, Thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.